The Kingmaker here. Welcome back to the Privilege of Oppression Part 2. I mentioned in the last video that I really wanted to get into some of the steps that we need to take in order to change our reality. So for those of you who saw Part 1, we should fundamentally be on the same page. I want to start off by making sure that the title of this series is clear. The privilege of oppression is when you identify as a victim, when you believe that you are being victimized or oppressed. Your privilege is the lack of responsibility for where you are, how you got there, and your ability to get out of it. That is the privilege of oppression. We are not the only people who have been oppressed. We aren't even the only people who have been enslaved, but we might be the only people who still are. And that's on us. Because 400 plus years ago, this knowledge that we're talking about now was not known, it makes sense why once slavery was over, people were still being lynched, our people. It makes sense why we were able to be breaking the law by being in a group of Black people after dark, and some of the insanity that we know took place in those following years and decades. I want to be clear about something. So let me be clear about this. In no way, shape, or form am I exonerating the slave masters. What did Black Panther say? The colonizers? I am not in any way, shape, or form removing responsibility from our oppressors. I am saying that had we been thinking, feeling, moving the way that some of us are starting to, if we collectively did not view ourselves as victims, they would have to go oppress someone else. We would not have been the target. Maybe in session 2, 3, or 4, we'll talk about slavery a little bit more in depth and kind of connect some of the dots as to the energetics behind that. There is not equality currently, racially, or hell, socially for that matter. But what you must know is that there is fairness. And the reason is because the universe is not biased. As we talked about in session 1, the laws and principles of creation work 100% of the time, regardless of the subject matter. It doesn't matter that I'm a Black woman, or this person's a white man, or this person is of Asian descent or Indian descent. It doesn't matter. It has no bearing on the way that the universe works. And if you're a person who would rather associate this with God, do you believe that God is biased, that God wanted us to suffer? I'm really curious about that. For my Christian and Muslim brothers and sisters, kings and queens, how do you reconcile that? Do you believe, since there is this inadequate, in my opinion, mentality around God, that he or she or the powers that be are some master puppeteers? If that is the case, why are we suffering? Why have we become victims? Why have we been oppressed? What's the justification if it's God's will, God's doing? Or why is God allowing it? Don't worry, I'll wait. The answer is, that's not the case at all. You have been imbued with the power that creates worlds. You have the ability to wield the forces of creation. God, angels, universe, source, infinite intelligence, whatever language works for you. You are connected to that power. You are the architect of your own reality. I am the architect of my own reality. We as a people created the victimization, the oppression that we live. And it's not just us as a people who did it. Women experience real oppression and victimization of all races, of all ethnicities. And we created that. We allowed men for generations to run over us, to mistreat us. And what's crazy is there's more women than there are men. But the mentality that we as women, as mothers, have passed down to our daughters. One day I'm going to tell you the story about my 11-year-old daughter and how she responded to something like that before. But some of us as women still think that we are less than. And because of that, we allow ourselves to be treated like that. That premise applies the same to us as Black people. We view ourselves as second-class citizens. We spew the king-queen bullshit all the time. And I call it bullshit because you don't know what that means. You don't know what it means to reclaim your throne, but I'm here to show you. I am here to tell you. I am here to guide you. Step 1 is decide what you want. This is your homework for those who are watching this and are going to continue to watch the series. If slavery never happened, if we came over to the United States of our own free will, like so many other immigrants have from other countries, if we had not experienced the tyranny, I can't even say this word right now. Y'all know what I'm saying. If we had not experienced what we did, how would the world work for us? How would it be working for us? If there were no limitations, if no one said you had to live within these parameters, police are going to kill you, you need to be afraid for your life, you're going to be incarcerated at obscene rates, you're going to be only allowed to have certain social standing or certain class, be a part of certain social classes. If none of that was a thing, how would the world work for you? Write the shit down. This is extremely important. Setting intentions is the most important part of the process of change. What do you want to experience as a Black woman or a Black man or a Black person who identifies however you identify? Take the same, and that's a valid point right there. For the LGBT community, if you stop believing that you're a target, that people won't, if you accept yourself in all of the splendor and all of your grandeur, you will not be the target of hate crimes. When you believe, when you don't accept yourself, when you want to express yourself a particular way and then you choose to hide it or do it with the energy that you're expecting to be viewed as other than amazing, you become a magnet for that. That's how the law of attraction actually works. So, to my Black brothers and sisters, I say to you, this premise, this privilege of oppression is not just relative to us. It's a relative to anybody who has ever been oppressed. After you decide how the world would work for you, if you could believe that it was possible for you, then I challenge you to focus only on that reality. I have a podcast called, episode on the Claim Your Crown podcast called Be Unrealistic as Fuck. And I'm going to be recording the next day or so another podcast called Defy Reality, so look out for that. Because I'm going to go into some really good detail on how you can do that and examples of where I've stood in the face of the exact opposite of what I wanted to experience, of being treated like less than I should be. And I defied reality because solely of my attention to only what I want and my belief in my ability to create my own reality. This only works if you believe that it's possible. Because even as things are changing, you won't see it if you won't believe it. You will be standing in the midst of change and won't be able to experience it. But your children will. Your children's children will. What does Abraham Hicks say? When you ask, it is given. It is always given. Your prayers are always answered. The question is, are you so focused on the contrasting experience, the negative thing, that you can't accept the solution? That you are holding yourself apart from being embraced by change. The Black Lives Matter movement has served its purpose. The people who didn't know that we were still being treated the way we were being treated are now aware. Now it's time to stop trying to make and force people to acknowledge our value and acknowledge our own value. Live, move, function, think, believe that we are worthy of the thrones that are our birthright. That's the new movement. Reclaiming our thrones. This is not about begging or asking or pleading. This is about exercising our God-given power. And that power begins with what we think. There's a reason that our cells and the neuro things happening in our brain mimic the actual universe and what it looks like. That's not on accident. And for those of you who have trouble wrapping your head around the concept of you creating your own reality, there's a mentor of mine, someone that I follow that I really appreciate. His name is Dr. Joe, I always mispronounce his name, Dispenza, maybe? And he is a neuroscientist. And he scientifically proves how this is true. That you can really create magic in your life. That is the process I teach, the creation of magic. Understand that how we got here is because we are reliving old programs over and over again from slavery. We're even reliving the same religion. Even though we know that as a part of our slave masters' mental or psychological warfare upon us, they gave us a religion with the imagery of a white God so that we would view them in the capacity of being our superiors. And we're still practicing the same religions in the same way, with the same imagery. Some have decided that God is black and, has a separate kind of worship dynamic around that. But so many of us are still thinking, feeling, and moving like our parents and our grandparents who were slaves. We're still doing the same practices, thinking the same way, going to the same churches, worshiping the same gods. And we wonder why we're experiencing the same things. We have to be the change. For those of you who may have grown up with a particular religious belief and has since then decided to think for yourself, I applaud you. Because change is not going to come. I love that Sam Cooke song. If we don't challenge the things that got us here. The subconscious programming in our heads that exalt white people is why we are here. The fact that we go to a church and look at a picture of a white God is why we believe that white people can oppress us. It's one of the factors anyway. There are others. Step number 2, focus only on the version of your reality and your future and teach this to your children. That is what you want. Do not see something that does not serve you, because your focus on it makes you a magnet for it. The whole concept of paying attention, you are buying that experience when you pay attention to something that does not serve you. You are also buying positive experiences when you pay attention to something that does. The laws and principles of creation work 100% of the time, regardless of the subject matter. There is not equality, but there is fairness. The universe, God, angels, source, infinite intelligence is not biased. No one is punishing us. Do you really think that God wants to punish you? Be the change. And we will reclaim our thrones. For those of you who watched this video, or the last one, part 1, this is the new movement. We were so ready to spread Black Lives Matter, and we talk about on a consistent basis how we are being oppressed and mistreated, and how our people are victimized and taken advantage of and targeted. Talk about your power. Because every time you open your mouth to perpetuate that, you're perpetuating the problem. So I challenge you to perpetuate the solution. Here's a new hashtag: reclaim our thrones. Reclaim our thrones. There is no victimhood in that. You can't be a king or a queen and a victim at the same time. Choose one. Pick a side. Which one will you be? Which one will you teach your children to be? A king, a queen who goes, look what they did to me. Look what they did to my ancestors. Yes, they are horrible and wrong, and it shouldn't have happened. But the only reason we were the ones they victimized is because we were magnets for that. And I guess I'm going to say this anyway. We were enslaving ourselves in Africa before they came over and got us. We started this shit. And now we're pointing fingers. We were enslaving ourselves. And then we attracted the biggest slave masters on the planet. And now we complain about it. One positive thing that came out of slavery is that the entire world is now against it. We were okay with it at one point until it was us by someone that didn't look like us. You are never a victim. Part of the psychological warfare is to help you to continue to believe and to perpetuate this story of victimhood. Because if the people who want to oppress you can cause you to believe that you are a victim, then you will never change your circumstances. We can look, those affluent Black people will look at unaffluent Black people who aren't making any money or on food stamps or welfare, and they'll be like, well, they could change it. I changed it. You can see your exercising of power then. How is this any different? Do not stay quiet about this message. I don't care who you say it came from. No one has to ever know. But share it with the people who need to hear it. And step number 3 is stop watching the struggle. Stop focusing on the suffering. Stop perpetuating that story. Because the perpetuation of that story does nothing but continue to magnetize ourselves to oppression. You have to change what you are willing to entertain first. You have to decide how the world works for you first. No one else is going to deliver you from oppression. We have to deliver ourselves. Have you ever seen a person who might have, under normal circumstances, been considered, either whether it's to have a disability or have something strange about them that would normally make them unaccepted, and they carried themselves with such confidence, such security, that even if you wanted to think some kind of way about something, you couldn't, because everything about them demands respect. Those, to my earlier point about how we magnetized ourselves, we became a magnet for the biggest slave masters. If we were not already doing that, if we were not already feeling enslaved and oppressed and victimized by our own fucking people, then they would have had to enslave someone else. Same thing with the Jews. Jewish people, just like black people, attracted their enslavement. The laws and principles of creation don't stop working because we're talking about a different race. They don't stop working because we're talking about a different subject. They work 100% of the time. So what are you going to do about it? If you want to be a part of the fight, stop fighting. Spread empowerment. Spread the ability for anyone that you come in contact with, yourself, your children, those who you love. The best way you could possibly protect them from oppression is to help them reclaim their throne. Is to teach them that they cannot be victimized. To teach them that it is literally outside of the realm of possibility for them to be enslaved to anything or anyone. There's other steps that we can take as a part of this process, but those are the three. Decide what you want. Decide how the world will work for you. Set clear intentions. That's all one, by the way. Set clear intentions. Eliminate all the things, all the limitations of what's happened over the last 400-600 years. Create a vision for your future, for your children and their children and so on, that does not involve suffering. Write it down. Review it often. Start until you believe it, that is possible. And then only focus on that. Even in the face of some other foolishness that happens. And then step 3, stop watching the foolishness. Stop watching the suffering. Stop perpetuating it. Stop talking about it. Stop making that we are victims the point. If you're going to talk about it, talk about our power to change this. Talk about how we should be teaching our children to think differently, to move differently, to live differently. Use the hashtag reclaim our thrones. Instead of Black Lives Matter, we don't need to beg anyone to know that our lives matter. There is scientific proof that Black women were the first beings, human anyway, on this planet. There is not another life that matters more. So we don't need to prove it. We don't need to beg for it. We need to accept it. We need to unchain ourselves. Stay tuned for part 3 of this series, The Privilege of Oppression. Sending light, love, and gratitude always. The Kingmaker.